is Shannon Green and welcome to Toxic Crime Tuesdays. Now, last week was my very first video and I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that has shown me love and support and actually took the time out to watch my video. I'm just so appreciative and I hope I can continue to deliver and keep bringing you these true crime videos, and I hope you continue watching them. So yeah, I just want to say, if you have watched my video, thank you. It really does mean a lot. So I just want to give a little disclaimer just before I get into this week's episode. This is a pretty heavy case. Last week was a very heavy case. They're all going to be heavy cases, but this one is different to last week's. This one is more graphic and contains certain disturbing content such as mentions of rape, torture, obviously murder. So if you feel like that's too much for you, then feel free to skip this one. Maybe watch last week's video if you haven't already, or maybe you can be a bit patient and just wait until next week's video. So if, like me, you like true crime and you're interested in hearing about it, then I highly suggest that you click the subscribe button, and then I can continue to make these videos for you lovely people. So if, like me, you are interested in true crime and for some strange reason you like hearing the sound of my voice, then please subscribe to my channel. So we're going to continue with this week's episode, and like I said, this one's a heavy one, and to be honest, this guy that we're going to be talking about, he is a top tier sicko. He was just a fucked up guy. So brace yourselves and let's get into it. So obviously, before I talk about all of the gruesome details, before I get into like the awful events that occurred at the hands of this man, we're going to go right back to the beginning. Now this case is about the Beauty Queen Killer. Now I don't know if you've heard of the Beauty Queen Killer before. I hadn't until I kind of like last week just went down a bit of a rabbit hole, done a bit of research in certain cases, and then I come across this one. I haven't actually heard of it before. So I was pretty surprised that I hadn't, because I'm really into true crime. And obviously this sounded like it was quite a high profile case at the time. So hopefully you haven't heard of this one either. So I'll be delivering something new to you guys. So yeah, put all that aside and we're going to continue with the case. So this week's episode is about a man named Christopher Bernard Wilder, and he was born on the 13th of March 1945. His father was an American naval officer, and not much is known about his mother other than the fact that she was an Australian native, and I don't think I mentioned that a minute ago, Christopher was born and lived in Sydney. So not much is known about his parents in general or about his childhood. However, I do know that Christopher was a very poorly child and he actually nearly died at birth. Now, I couldn't actually find what the cause was, what the reasoning was, but obviously we've got to bear in mind this was 1945, so medicine then wasn't nowhere near as advanced as it is today. So it could have been something that would be deemed as relatively minor today. So I don't know, that's just my theory, but it may not be, I don't really know. But he was a very poorly child and was in and out of hospital throughout his infancy. And then when Christopher was 2 years old, he actually went swimming with his family and nearly drowned in the swimming pool, which pretty rocky start to any child's life, isn't it? It's awful. So as a kid, Christopher seemed like just a standard average child. He seemed pretty happy-go-lucky. He had friends, he got on well in school. However, things began to take a dark turn in Christopher's life once he hit his teenage years. Christopher had begun to have quite twisted sexual fantasies. He would fantasize over brutally torturing girls that he knew, and he would fantasize about raping them and killing them. And in January the 4th, 1963, those fantasies finally came to life, and on a beach in Sydney, Christopher was an active participant in the gang rape of a 13-year-old girl. Yeah, so Christopher was only 17 at the time, which, raping anyone at any age is just absolutely disgusting. But when you're that young as well to want to do that, I just find that more disturbing. It's just disgusting. So yeah, that's what happened, and obviously the girl then went to the police, and Christopher pled guilty to carnal knowledge. And now you're going to get, well, I hope you get frustrated at this part. I got really frustrated at this part. Christopher was sentenced to 1 year's probation and electroshock therapy and group therapy. That was it. Literally just a slap on the wrist. They were just like, look, can you promise us you won't do this again? And if you don't, you won't have to go to prison. We can just give you 1 year's probation, and some group therapy, you know, just to get you through this difficult time. That's all he got. This is what infuriates me so much, not just about him, because this is something that happens even today, where men attack women and get away with it. And this is why so many women and girls are afraid to come forward when they have been sexually attacked, because the justice system is f***ed up. It just makes me so angry that someone can do something so heinous, so vile, and it's like that they feel that just probation could be enough, and some therapy will be able to teach someone a lesson. Like, no, of course it's not going to. And what about the victim? What did she get? Did she get any kind of therapy to help her get through what she's been through? Not only did she have to learn to not learn to accept, but learn to deal with what happened to her, she also had to deal with the fact that she could potentially bump into Christopher and the other guys out and about because he wasn't behind bars. Just poor girl. It just makes me so sad. So we're going to fast forward to 1969 now. Christopher is now 23 years old, and he marries a woman named Christine Pollock. I hope I pronounced that right. Falls head over heels with her, and shortly afterwards they get married, and everything seems perfect. It seems like happily ever after. But just a week later,
1 week later,
Christopher's disgusting sexual behaviour continues. Marriage clearly didn't make a difference, and neither did his 80 years probation that he got ages before. Nothing made a difference, nothing was effective. So one evening, Christine found pairs of knickers and naked photographs of women that were clearly taken without their consent. I think Christopher had like a bit of a interest in, well, I think he was a bit of a peeping Tom, and he liked to peek through people's windows and take naked photographs of them whilst they were getting undressed. And Christine found these in his briefcase, which he kept in his car. He never took it into the house. So naturally she was like, bye, which yeah, we all would be, wouldn't we? And then not long after that, in November of the same year, Christopher used some of these photographs that he took of a nursing student in Sydney. He decided to threaten this woman with these photos. He threatened to leak them if she didn't have sex with him, basically. So she went to the police, and soon after she dropped the charges. Also around this time, he tried coercing, I think it was a high school student, into giving him a blowjob, and if she didn't, he threatened to beat her. So obviously she felt like she had to do it because she was scared for her life. She didn't know what this man was going to do to her. And again, no repercussions, nothing come of it. The hot Australian weather just proved too much for Christopher. He didn't like it, it was just too much for him, so he decided to move to America. Now, this is what I find really weird about this, although obviously this whole story is just utterly bizarre and vile, but this is just a really minuscule piece of information that isn't even relevant, but I just find it really weird, is that he lived in Australia. Yes, we all know Australia is boiling. But he moves to America, and he moves to southern Florida, which I've been to Florida. It is hot. But I am from the UK, so I'm not really used to the hot weather. But if I don't know, if you're gonna if the hot weather is an issue, why would you not move to, like, because there's plenty of other places in America that are a lot cooler than Florida, but no, he decided to move to southern Florida. I don't know. It's just something that I just find a bit strange, but it's not really relevant anyway. So once he was all settled into his Floridian life, Christopher got a well-paid job as a construction and electrical contractor. Whilst he was living in Florida, Christopher, he got a bit of a taste for the finer things in life. He liked to go on ski vacations quite regularly, which is what all rich people seem to do, isn't it? And he purchased, I think it's Palm Beach County real estate, which was worth nearly $400,000 at the time, which at that time, this was, I don't know, about in the 70s, so that is a hell of a lot of money for that time. It doesn't seem like that much for a property nowadays, but back then it was, so I can imagine his property was huge. And he had a thing for, he liked to participate in the Miami Grand Prix. He loved racing fast cars. He was just deemed to be, well, he was seen by so many people as this well-mannered, charming playboy who just had a thing for attractive young women. So many people loved him. His colleagues, friends that he made in Florida, women just seemed to like flock to him. Like they all loved him. They just found him like irresistibly charming, which I don't know, like I find hard to believe in a way because of the way that he's like, but obviously he was a clever man, you know, he probably was so able to just switch like that and be able to put on this charming demeanour to be able to get what he wanted from people, and then, you know, it would just turn like that as soon as he got these people where he wanted them to be. Whilst living in Florida, Christopher was a charming playboy who drove fast cars, and he liked to wear pastel coloured tailored suits. That was his thing, that was his trademark. So he liked to dabble in photography, which we already know, and he had a jacuzzi just outside of his bedroom. He also had a speedboat, And he was doing pretty well for himself. He had a lot of money. He was clearly very materialistic, and he just liked to show it off. He liked to flaunt it, particularly to charm the ladies. Christopher had a thing for attractive young women, and in an interview for a dating service videotaped in 1981, he said, "I want to date and enjoy the company of women with depth. I'm looking for a long-term relationship, but not marriage." Christopher led a double life. He would lure women into his fancy, super expensive cars with a promise of a modelling contract. He would approach women and he would tell them that he knew lots of high profile people in the modelling industry, and that if they come with him, he'd be able to take some photographs of them and he could hook them up with a modelling contract. Now, he would approach so many women to do this, and some would accept, some would decline. He fooled everyone that knew him. His colleagues and friends would perceive Christopher to be kind, respectable, and the perfect gentleman. Little did they know that that perception was a far cry from the person that Christopher really was. During his time in Florida, Christopher's interest in taking photographs of naked women without their knowledge and consent continued, and between 1971 and 1975, Christopher faced several charges in relation to sexual misconduct, but was never jailed for any of these, never faced any jail time. During this period, Christopher approached a teenage girl with yet again the promise to hook her up with a modelling contract. This girl was vacationing at the time in Florida with her family, and he approached her on the beach. He said, "Look, I'll take some pictures of you, you come into my truck, I'll just take a couple of quick snaps of you, you can be on your way, and I'll give my guy a ring, and then I will hook you up with a modelling contract, and they will call you within the next few days." Obviously that didn't happen. Once he got this girl into his truck, his unfailingly charming demeanour changed, and suddenly he turned dark and aggressive, and he grabbed the girl and raped her. This girl managed to escape afterwards and went to the police. However, once again, Christopher never faced any jail time. How does that happen though? Honestly, how does someone commit, even if you commit one rape, you should be convicted, you should be sentenced. How do you commit these many sexual offences and get away with it? No wonder this man at this point was probably so conceited and arrogant and thought that he was God, and thought, it doesn't matter what I do now, I can get away with it. I can go and rape as many women as I want, I can murder them and no one will catch me. That is what he obviously thought. And you will see why soon when we go into it a little bit later. On April the 13th, 1980, Christopher attacked and attempted to kidnap 17-year-old Carla Hendry in Beverly in Massachusetts. But she luckily managed to escape. Christopher did his normal, can I just take a few pictures of you and then I can hook you up with someone that will get you a modelling contract. So she did. She got in his car, he raped her, but luckily she managed to get away before he could do any more damage. And then in 1982, Christopher decided to visit his parents in Australia. Whilst he was in Australia, he committed 2 sexual offences against 2 teenage girls. They were both 15 years old at the time. He asked these girls to pose nude for him so he could take photographs of them. So he was arrested, and I don't know how much it was, but a certain amount of of bail was put up for him, and his parents paid it. They bailed him out. So once again, this is becoming a theme now, isn't it? So once again, Christopher was not jailed. He got away with it. So now we're going to fast forward to where it really kicks into gear, to 1984. And this is where Christopher begins a 6-week cross-country murder spree in the United States. It is said that he had between 8 to 9 victims. However, it is believed that he had a lot more than that. And I will go into that a little bit later, because there are a lot of unsolved murders and rapes that were around this particular time, and they were in certain locations where Christopher was also at the time. So yeah, like I said, I will get into that in a little bit. So now I am going to begin talking about Christopher's 6-week crime spree. So by this point, Christopher's sexual fantasies and fantasies about murder had heightened. He'd become compulsive about killing. It was a sexual addiction to him at this point. It was something that turned him on. All of his crimes were sexually motivated. He was a charming man, just in his 30s, so he felt he was easy to approach, and obviously he had his line that he would use about knowing high people in high places. So in Florida, on February 26, 1984, at the Miami Grand Prix, Christopher was there, and he was racing. He met a woman named Rosario Gonzalez, and she went missing on this day. And she has never been seen since. But a lot of people saw her speaking with Christopher. They saw her and Christopher leave. So obviously he soon enough became the prime suspect. And shortly after that, on March the 5th, Christopher's ex-girlfriend, Elizabeth Kenyon, who was also the former Miss Florida, she also went missing. Neither women have ever been found. Police linked Christopher to both women after consulting a private investigator who was hired by Elizabeth's parents to discover information related to her disappearance. They felt like they needed to go down that route. I think they felt like the police just weren't doing enough, but I don't think the police really had much to go on at this point. So they hired a private investigator who could do more extensive research, and he did, and he found that both girls were linked to Christopher. So soon enough he became the prime suspect. March the 18th, Christopher met Teresa Waite Ferguson from the Merritt Square Mall in Merritt Island in Florida. He lured this girl into his truck, raped her, strangled her to death, and then dumped her body at Canaveral Groves, where it was discovered on March the 23rd. On March the 20th, Christopher met 19-year-old Linda Grover from Florida State University. He had met this girl and once again offered to take photographs of her so that he could send them to his friend for a potential modelling contract, but this girl had declined. And Christopher didn't like that, so he kidnapped her and he assaulted her in the parking lot. He wrapped her up in a blanket, put her in the trunk of his car, and Linda was taken to Glen Oaks Motel where she was raped. He blinded her with a blow dryer and super glue. He applied copper wires to her feet and passed an electric current through them. When she tried to get away, he beat her, but she escaped and locked herself in the bathroom where she began pounding on the walls. Now at this point, Christopher is freaking out because obviously this is in a motel. There are people close by, in rooms literally next to them. So Linda is banging on the walls trying to get other people's attention. People start coming out, opening doors, banging back, you know, thinking what the hell's going on. So Christopher gets in Linda's car and he flees. Once Christopher has done that, he freaked out and he thought, I'm gonna need to branch out. I'm gonna need to go somewhere else. I cannot continue doing these crimes in Florida because soon enough I'm gonna get found out. So he decides to travel to Texas. And just the very next day, Christopher approaches Terry Walden, who is a 23-year-old wife, mother and nursing student at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. He approaches her and once again says, hey, you know, you're so beautiful. Have you ever considered modelling? Because, you know, if you're considering it, I actually have a friend that is in the modelling industry. Can I just take a few pictures of you? She turned him down and Christopher went on his way. But then sadly, 2 days later, they ran into each other again. And Christopher just took this opportunity to kidnap her. He then stabbed her to death and dumped her body in a canal where it was found on March the 26th. And this woman was, well, it doesn't matter how old she was, it's sad regardless of anyone's age. She was a mother as well. Like, I'm presuming the child was only young. Now, that child had to grow up without his mother because of what this man had done to her. It's just don't get how people like this exist. After Christopher killed her, he fled in her car, and then on March the 25th, Christopher abducted 21-year-old Susan Logan at the Penn Square Mall in Oklahoma City. Christopher took her 180 miles north to Kansas and checked into room 30 of 135 Inn or I-35 Inn, I'm not too sure. And after breakfast the next morning he drove to Milford Reservoir, 90 miles northeast of Newton. This is when Christopher proceeded to stab her to death and dump her body under a tree. So Christopher feels like his work here is done. His work in Texas and Kansas is done. So he decides to move somewhere else. He doesn't want to stay in the same place at the same time because he feels like if he does, he could get found out. Which is clever thinking. So then in Colorado, Christopher meets 18-year-old Cheryl Bonaventura in Grand Junction on March the 29th. They went to a diner together and they went for something to eat, and they told staff that they were heading to Vegas. And they decided to stop to Durango on the way. So on March the 30th, they were seen at the Four Corners Monument, after which Christopher checked into the Pageboy Motel in Arizona. Christopher shot and stabbed Bonaventura to death around March the 31st. He then dumped her body in a river in Utah, but sadly her body was not found until May the 3rd. Whilst Christopher is in Vegas, he then meets 17-year-old Michelle Kaufman, who was an aspiring model. So this woman is obviously his target demographic. This is the kind of person he wants to bump into because then he can use his line. And he will know that this girl, she's desperate to get into the modelling industry, so she would be willing. She would be willing to have her photographs taken. So she was at a 17 magazine cover model competition at the Meadows Mall in Vegas. And sadly, that was when she was last seen. Christopher was also at the competition and he was seen to have been stalking her. Her body remained undiscovered near a Southern California roadside rest stop until May the 11th. and was not identified until mid-June via dental x-rays. Obviously, as you can imagine, this was, you know, quite a long time that her body was just left there. And as you all probably know, Vegas is incredibly hot, so rigor mortis would have kicked in like that, and her body would have been so badly decomposed that that was probably, well, that was obviously the only way that she could have been identified. So whilst Christopher is in California, he bumps into a 16-year-old girl named Tina Marie Risico. She had just filled out a job application in Hickory Farms, which is just north of Torrance in California. Christopher followed her into the store, and on their way outside he offered her £100 to pose for him. He told her that he was shooting a billboard and he said she would be seen around for miles. But what he needed was a few test shots. So she said, yeah, sure. So she went with him and she posed for him. After a few shots, Tina then said that she had to go home, and this made Christopher very angry. And he pulled out a gun and struck the barrel into her mouth and said, "Your modelling days are over." Christopher then bound and gagged Tina, and he put her into his car, a one that he had stolen from Texas, and drove with her for over 200 miles to El Centro in California. There he already had a motel room, and he took her inside, he tied her to the bed and then attacked her. But weirdly enough, he decided not to kill Tina, which seemed to be his MO. That seemed to be what he was doing with all of his previous victims, unless they managed to escape. But Christopher decided not to kill Tina because he felt like Tina could be of some use. He felt like a young girl would potentially be more approachable for his next potential victim. So he felt like he could get Tina to approach a woman and lure her back to the motel that they were staying at, where Christopher would then proceed to rape and kill their next victim. As soon as Tina was kidnapped, a missing persons report was filed straight away. She had a boyfriend and family, and they were all frantically worried and wondering where she was. Her boyfriend insisted that Tina would not have run away, which I think is what the police initially thought. They just kind of branded her as a teenage runaway, but her boyfriend insisted that that was not the case. They knew she had been at Hickory Farms filling out a job application. The store manager identified Christopher Wilder as the man he had seen approach Tina, and Christopher and his now captive decided to turn and drive east, and then they stayed in New Mexico on April the 7th. Christopher began to see news articles and see himself on the TV, and this is when he began to grow increasingly worried, and this is where he thought that Tina could come of some use, because obviously this is becoming quite a high profile case. People would recognise him, so if he stayed, I don't know, in the car or in the motel, at least if Tina then went and, you know, coerced these women to come back with her, they wouldn't spot Christopher until they was in that room with him, which then it would probably be too late. So in Indiana, Christopher and Tina meet Dawnette Wilt, who was also another 16-year-old girl. She was filling out a form at a store when another girl interrupted her and introduced herself as Tina Marie Wilder. She asked her to just step outside a minute so that she could speak to the manager, and obviously that manager was no other than Christopher Wilder. He had grabbed Dawnette and forced her into his car with his gun. He placed duct tape over both her eyes and mouth, and since he had a driver who was Tina, he was free to torment and rape Dawnette while she was in the car. They then stopped at a hotel in Ohio where Dawnette was treated to Christopher's special torture device. and then they all drove to Pennsylvania to New York State. Tina and Christopher took photographs of Niagara Falls before they went to Rochester for the night. There, Dawnette was raped and tortured once again. Christopher warned both girls that if they tried to draw attention to themselves or tried to escape, he would kill them. And they obviously believed him. They could see exactly what he was capable of, so they were just too afraid to do anything about it, and I don't blame them. Christopher had then seen an appeal for Tina Marie's return on the TV. He then decided to drive them both away, and then he took Dawnette out into the woods near Penn. He tried to suffocate her, but she struggled so much he just couldn't get a grip of her. So he took out his knife and stabbed her in the front and in the back. She pretended to be dead, so he left her there and he walked back to the car and fled. Once Dawnette knew that Christopher had gone, she struggled to her feet and walked to a road where she found someone that was just driving past who could take her to a hospital. She told the police that Christopher was driving her car and was heading towards Canada. He had told the girls that he would not be taken alive. Now we're getting closer towards the end of the story, and this part is about Christopher's final victim, 33-year-old Beth Dodge. Christopher and Tina Marie bumped into Beth Dodge in Eastville Mall in New York. He persuaded Tina to get chatting to Beth and to coerce her to come over to their car where Christopher was waiting. Beth then proceeds over to their car, and this is when Christopher grabs her and throws her in the back of the car. They then drive off, where Christopher found a deserted gravel pit. He made her get out, where he then shot Beth in the back. Once this had happened, Christopher, I think he began to realise that his time was running out. So he and Tina Marie decided to part ways. Christopher then drove Tina to Boston's Logan Airport, and he gave Tina enough money to fly back home and to get a cab. So then Tina got a flight back home, where she was then reunited with her family and her boyfriend. On April the 13th, 1984, which was actually a Friday, so it's Friday the 13th, Christopher tried to grab another girl. He noticed a 19-year-old girl by the side of the road whose car had broken down. So Christopher went and inspected, and he had a little look and obviously realised that she needed more fuel. Christopher offered to give this girl a lift to the gas station so that she could fill up a tank and then take it back to the car and then fill it up. Once she was in the car, they then passed the gas station, and obviously she thought that was a little bit weird. So she shouted to Christopher, "Look, can you pull over or can you drive back?" So then he pulled out a gun. However, Christopher had slowed down quite a bit. So this girl then had the opportunity to open up the car door and to jump out. So she managed to escape. So then Christopher decided to dump a lot of the contents in his car that specifically belonged to his victims. So these were also his camera as well, his suitcase, several articles, and obviously all the things that he had taken from his victims. At a service station in New Hampshire, about 12 miles from the Canadian border, he drew the attention of two state troopers. They then got out of their car, they approached Christopher and just started asking him a couple of questions. Once they were just asking him some general questions, I think they realised that they recognised him. So this was then Christopher kind of realised that they were onto him. Christopher walks off, goes to get in his car. Then the state troopers call out to him, they approach him, Christopher pulls out a gun, and then the state troopers then pull out their gun. Whilst in a bit of a scuffle, 2 shots are fired. The first shot went through Christopher and into the state trooper's chest, and the second went into Christopher's heart, and he died there and then. It had been 47 days since the first disappearance was reported, and Christopher had been on the run for 26 days, and his luck had finally run out. Christopher was now dead and no longer able to cause any more harm and not able to kill any more poor innocent women. However, as much as this was great news for everyone, obviously the families of the victims didn't get the kind of closure that they had wanted. They probably had myriad of questions that had gone unanswered, and the only person that could answer these questions was dead. So along with the 8 known victims that Christopher had killed between February and April of 1984, Christopher had been suspected in the murders and disappearances of many other women, including some remains who were found around Florida in areas he was known to frequent. So I'm just going to read off a list of these potential victims, well, not potential victims, but were victims that could have potentially died at the hands of Christopher Wilder. So on March the 15th, 1984, 15-year-old Colleen Osborne went missing after leaving her Daytona Beach home on that date. Christopher is also a suspect in Australia's unsolved Wanda Beach murders, where 2 young girls were killed. It was Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock at Wanda Beach near Sydney on January the 11th, 1965, which is where Christopher was living at that time. And a suspect sketch was drawn up which looked strikingly similar to Christopher. And in 1982, the skeletal remains of 2 unidentified women were unearthed near property owned by Christopher in Florida. So it's pretty suspicious, isn't it? Shari Lynn Ball, a 20-year-old aspiring model, she went missing in October 1983 from Boca Raton in Florida. Nancy K. Brown, a 25-year-old native of Illinois, disappeared while vacationing in Cocoa Beach in Florida on June the 6th, 1983. Tammy Lynn Leppert, she was 18 and she was last seen around 11:30 a.m. on July the 6th, 1983, also in Cocoa Beach, Florida. An unidentified woman who was known as Broward County Jane Doe was found floating in a canal on February 18th, 1984 in Davie, Florida. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that he was the culprit? From what I've read about these cases as well, the way that these women were murdered, the ones that weren't so badly decomposed that they couldn't really determine the cause of death, the ones that weren't, they were raped, they were strangled or stabbed to death, and their bodies were just dumped either in a field, under a tree, in a river, which obviously, even though Christopher didn't have a set pattern, it's still very similar to how Christopher murdered these women and how he disposed of their bodies. So I think personally it was him, and obviously it's pretty suspicious that all of these were in areas that Christopher would be in at that time. So I personally think it was him, but let me know what you guys think. So that concludes the case this week. I hope I delivered it well enough for you guys, and I would love to get your feedback on it. I don't particularly like doing serial killer cases, to be honest, because I like to be a voice for the victims, and I like to go into a lot of depth and detail on their backgrounds and the people that they were. I don't really like to, I don't know, give the murderers much exposure, or come across like I'm justifying what they're doing by speaking about their backgrounds or their childhoods, which is not what I would ever intend to do. I just like to get a good background knowledge on anyone's life that I'm speaking about. However, when it's a serial killer, because they have so many victims, it would unfortunately take me a very long time to, you know, do an in-depth expose on everyone, like on every single victim. So I'm not really going to be in a habit of speaking about serial killers, but I would like to know if you would like me to talk about if you would like me to talk about serial killers, if you'd like to hear me do a couple of videos about it, maybe sort of towards Halloween. I might do a couple more around that time, I don't really know, but yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts and opinions on it anyway. So just before we go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next week for another episode of Toxic Crime Tuesdays. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. So see you later.